Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, I should say. Don't want to push the day ahead too far. We have too many good things to cheat time. On behalf of the England Conservatory and the Alumni Association, its director Cheryl Weber, we welcome you to this event for Reading Weekend with a few minutes with John Heiss. My name is Charles Peltz, and I'm fortunate enough. Thank you. I'm fortunate enough to be now a faculty colleague of John Heiss's and a student, and I do not put student in the past tense. It is impossible to be in any relationship with John Heiss and not feel that every moment one learns something. And it is always something deep and profound, even if he expresses it in a way that is facile and easy, because he communicates beautifully to people, not as objects of learning, but as human beings to be shared with. And so we're delighted that he's here. So, John, it's September 1967, and it's your first month at NEC. Now, how old are you? Who has hired you? What are you hired to do? And do you remember your first day, or at least your first week at the England Conservatory?
Vividly. It was my first full-time job. I was recommended by Milton Babbitt, my teacher at Princeton, and I met Gunther Schuller in New York and then Robert Cogan, and I liked them both, and they invited me to come. And I wrestled with coming because I had a very nice offer from Northwestern, and it was a little higher salary and a little more job security because New England Conservatory was very fragile at that time. We didn't have much money, and we were thinking that we might have to close it, and 3 years later we almost did. So what do you know, though, I didn't take the Chicago job, I took the Boston one, and I wrestled with that, Charlie, trying to figure out which was better and making lists, and then unable to decide. And my teacher, Kim, said, stop trying to think, trying to feel. Wake up tomorrow morning and make a snap decision, and then see how it feels at noon. I woke up at 8:30, decided Chicago, and by 9 o'clock it was Boston. A lot of reasons, I think. You know, one was to be closer to my family. Two was I like to sail on salt water more than fresh water. The Red Sox were doing very well that year, if you remember. And something about the conservatory and Schuller coming in seemed to me to have a lot of hope to it. And it turned out to be a very wonderful decision. I'm so glad I made it. It's just 45 years ago, and I'm still having a good time.
What was that first, do you remember that first day or first week? I mean, how did it feel to be the newest faculty member?
People kept calling me Mr. Heiss, and I kept pivoting around to see where my father was. I couldn't get used to that. And, but I met people right away that I liked and whom I had a rapport with instantaneously. Many students, first of all. I can always remember Craig Smith in those early years, or Chris Kruger. Bob Stallman, just people that have gone on, John Lindell, who's here, terrific people. Andrea Mason sitting right there. These are all early, I don't call them students, I mean they're friends, and I was a little older, so I got to tell them what I thought, but they already knew a lot, and they would probe me and ask questions, and you could see that it was going well when they played great and the light was in their eyes, and my students have always been a great source of inspiration for me. I feel that I learned tremendous things from my students. And I'm giving you a long answer rather than a short one. But I walked up the steps on Huntington Avenue, which is where the entry was in those years. And I saw somebody that I recognized right away standing there with a group of students around him. This was James Papatsakis, whom I had come to know in high school because he came with the Boston Symphony Chamber Players to Bronxville High School, where I was a junior, I think, at the time. And it was a small touring ensemble, and they didn't have any second chair winds. And so the high school teacher, a wonderful fellow, Robert Brown, decided that I and 4 other principal wind players would play second winds in the Boston Symphony Chamber Orchestra. So I got to sight read in a concert the Prokofiev Classical Symphony second flute part. And I was terrified. And all I did was count and play all the whole notes at the right time. But then Jimmy was there playing first, and he was very reassuring. He patted me on the shoulder after it was over. He said, "You're going to be fine. I'll meet you later." I said, "I don't know about that. I'm going on in math probably." He said, "Well, we'll see." And so then I'm walking into the conservatory, it's 12 years later, and there he is on the steps, and I saw him, and he saw me, and I said, I remember you. And he said, I remember you. And now I know who you are and what you're doing. You do a lot with contemporary music. I'm going to send you students, and I want you to help my students learn pieces that I don't know how to teach. It's a good thing you're here. And that made me feel good because I had been hired, now to answer your other question, primarily to teach theory, which I loved, but not to be involved with the performance process very much, which I also loved and was very involved with as a player. Flute, piano, and saxophone. I did a lot with all three instruments for many, many years. And so I was hired to teach 11 hours of theory, and Gunther said to me, no, sorry, it was 9 hours and then a 2-hour orchestration class. And he said, what would you like to do with the other hour? And I said, coach chamber music. And he said, okay, I have an assignment for you. I want you to prepare Henry Brandt's Angels and Devils for 11 flutes. And I did, and it went great, and we took it to New York, and we made a great recording. And the next year he said, I'd like you to do a lot more chamber music. So we divided it halfway between theory and chamber music, and then I was already, I think, marked as somebody who did a number of different things, which was tricky here. That most everybody was in a particular category. You taught theory, or you taught music history, or you played your instrument and taught that, or you conducted, or you led a large ensemble, but you didn't do all of those things. And for me, the chance to do all of those things was thrilling, and it developed over a period of several years in the Schuler administration. It was great to be here when Gunther came into it, made a terrific difference to the school.
You came to NEC, as most of us do, as the result of a journey that at that time probably seemed long. You were how old in 1967?
28.
There you go. So we're going to ask some basic questions, the things that most people probably don't know, but are always good to fill in the gaps. So you were born in?
1938.
And where?
New York City.
Which borough?
Manhattan.
Very good. Where'd you go to high school?
Well, my parents moved out to Bronxville, New York when I was 4. And I went to the Bronxville school system, which was all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade in the same building.
And what was your favorite subject in high school?
Music.
And your teacher's name was, you said?
Well, Robert Brown, Robert Minard, Murray Linden. I had a wonderful piano teacher from the age of 4 named Maud Perry.
Maud Perry.
Maud Perry.
Yeah. Do they still have piano teachers named Maud? I wish. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And then it turned out that a cousin in my family, Nancy Fletcher, who is maybe here. Where is she? There she is. Okay. She is an ace at playing by ear and playing a lot of popular music with tremendous panache and groovy chord progressions and a flair in both hands. So I went to study with her to learn how to play by ear, and it was thrilling. And Nancy, you're still my teacher now. Okay, I haven't forgotten anything. And that happened when I was about 12. I started the flute when I was 9, the saxophone and the piano at 12.
Did you ever, as a saxophonist, did you play swing music or jazz?
Yeah, sure. I had my own band, and I was in another band with older fellows, and I had some kind of a dance band, as we called it in those days, or jazz band, all the way from about 10th grade past the end of college.
Did you have any favorite saxophonists that you admired?
I liked Stan Getz because he was so cool. He had a beautiful sound. He had a Mark VI Selmer tenor, and my father got me one for my graduation from high school, and I played that a lot. It was funny to also study classical flute with James Hosmer, who was in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and to be told that it was fine that I played all the instruments, but I better try to get really good at one. And so he drilled me pretty well on the flute, and it helped a lot.
To what degree did you actually take that advice, or did you play all those instruments under your blanket?
I kept it secret. I had a resolve to myself in high school that the study hour that we had every Tuesday or every Thursday, or sometimes both, I would try over the course of grade 8 through grade 12 to learn every instrument.
Did you?
Yeah, except I didn't get very good on violin and viola. But I became pretty proficient on brass, to the great detriment of my embouchure as a flutist. And everybody was yelling and screaming at me not to do that, but I couldn't help it. And I had a good friend who was a terrific trombone player that taught me a lot, and we learned even how to imitate the town fire signal out the window of the school building. So it's fun to know all the instruments, and then to find out when you get older that it's valuable.
So you leave high school and you go to college where?
Lehigh University.
And that was a good experience? You liked being at Lehigh?
There were terrific positives, and I was also very unhappy there for part of it because everybody was so drunk all the time, and there was a kind of emphasis on I don't know what to call it exactly, but trying to get away with doing the minimum amount of classwork that you could. And I was in the Lehigh band, though, fortunately, which is a fabulous band. And I stayed loyal to them for 4 years, met Jonathan Elkis, the composer who later influenced me to make the decision that I made. And we played the Schoenberg theme and variations and the Stravinsky symphonies and winds, and not badly. For a college band, Lehigh had a great band. And I was rewarded my senior year by being the piccolo player that got to be the dot on the I of Lehigh on the football field.
So it's good if you'd gone to Ohio State, you would have had a little bit of tubist, because that dots the I.
Yeah, that's right. No, Lehigh's I was a piccolo player my senior year anyway.
What was your major?
Math.
And what branch of mathematics were you particularly interested in?
I was interested in all of math in high school, and I seemed to excel, so I thought I should go on with that. My father got me some good connections to IBM, with which I worked for 4 summers. And I thought my math background and my computer programming, as I was learning it in those years, would be my livelihood. But my father understood something. I didn't actually find it thrilling once I was looking at the prospect of a full-time job from IBM. I had to say to them, I might be going on in music. And they said, we'll keep it open for you for a year, get back to us, and we'll hold the job for you. And a year later, I called them back and said, I don't think I'm going to come. I've got my life set now where I'm going. And they said, we knew it all the time. We just wanted you to be comfortable. They said, pursue your dream. And my father, Frank, said, well, John, you won't have probably the income we were expecting for you, but you may have more psychic income. That proved true.
Grad school?
Well, Columbia initially to get the undergraduate degree made up, and then I was admitted to the graduate program there. I also spent a lot of time up at Juilliard.
So did you actually graduate from Lehigh, or did you leave?
Oh, no, I graduated. Well, you want to know how I graduated from Lehigh? Let me tell you about this. My grades, I did a lot of music on that campus. There wasn't a music major yet, but if there had been, I would have gotten that credit. But my math grades went down, 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 and I finally got to my final math course, complex variable, which is differential and integral calculus of functions that have the square root of -1 in them. That's called an imaginary number. I went into the final meeting in 80 to pass the course. Instead of 80, I got 18 on the final. And it was the worst grade I ever got. I went to see the teacher. I said, this is the worst I ever did. And he said, yeah, this is the worst I've ever seen. And I said, I need to figure how to go on. I'm going to be studying with a flute teacher in New York and maybe taking some courses at Columbia or Juilliard, and I'm going to take this math course over again, maybe at NYU. I just wanted your recommendation where to head for this. And he said, I have another idea in mind. I've been watching you. You do a lot of music, don't you? I said, yeah, I might even go on with that, but I'm not sure yet. He said, if you promise me you will never go on in math, I'm going to pass you right now. So he gave me a D- and I got out of there.
Are there any current students here? Good, okay. That is a non-replicable phenomenon. It is an anomaly in education. It will never happen again. Family. Somewhere along the line in this period, you must have met somebody.
Look, I want to tell you that a lot of my family is here now. My sister, my brother, his wife, and 2 of their children, my son, my daughter, and her whole family. And I'm really glad you guys are here, and thanks for coming. I've lost my wife, everybody knows that, and that's a hole in the heart, really. But there are good friends all around, sailing friends. There's several sailing friends here. And colleagues and students, what could be one more wonderful? This is lovely. I'm happy. But I met Arlene. You want to know about that?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Can you hear me if I talk like this?
No.
Okay, I'll get back here. This feels odd, though.
We'll just move it up.
How do you do that?
Bring the instrument to you, John.
The conductor always knows what to do. I went into a party at Lehigh. I'd been told by the band director's wife that she had a good friend that I would like, named Arlene. And I thought, well, I wonder who this will be and what she will look like. So I walk into this party, and there are about 15 or 20 of my bandmates. It was an all-male college, of course, university. They're all sitting around a beautiful brunette in the middle of the floor who's laughing and tossing her hair and smiling and telling jokes. And she's completely the center of attention of all those guys. And I'm looking at this, and I said, "That's Arlene?" And Marcia said, "Yes." And I said, "No girl like that would ever be interested in me." And that was what I thought, believe it or not. But I was wrong. And so I asked her out for a date, and she said yes, and I was floored. And
So were you married when you came to Boston? Had you married?
Oh, yeah, we married in 1964.
Oh, okay.
And we came to Boston in 1967, and she always worked. She got her graduate degree in English just a little bit before I got my master's from Princeton, which is where I finally got the master's. And then it was time to move and somewhere that you might make an income and start your life. So we came up here, lived on the Fenway, went over to Fenway Park, down to community boating, and over to New England Conservatory. And it was very, very wonderful right from the start. And we had the years from 64 to 69 just alone with the two of us. Then we had our children in 69 and 71.
Final question about math. Have you missed having a more math-centered life? You know, because when we're at the front end, it doesn't look promising, but then we leave it. We leave certain things. So
I don't miss it at all. There was something about, I don't want to put anybody down, okay? I loved IBM, and they were very good to me, but the corporate culture is very different. The individual is not the person that matters so much as the collective meshing of wills and energies. And you have to wear the right clothing, and you use the punch card to punch in, and you have to show tremendous respect and distance from the people that are your superiors. I don't know, and it was also not as inspiring to me as music was. So I don't miss it. What I do miss is some paths I didn't take in music, and you can't do everything. But as a saxophone player, I was admitted in 1959 to the New Lenox School of Jazz. And I sent in a tape, and then I played an audition, and it went well, and they admitted me, and they gave me a full scholarship. IBM that summer offered me a very, very high salary for the job, and that was my last summer that I was going to work for them before I would graduate. So I turned down the jazz opportunity. It turns out that Gunther Schuller and John Lewis were the two principal faculty members, and that they accepted two saxophone players. One was me, the other was Ornette Coleman. And so I missed out on that. That would have been an incredible experience to have, but you have to make choices. So I don't play jazz now anymore either, the way I used to, although it's still part of my heart and soul, and I love playing the way Nancy plays at the piano, and then I team up with her sometimes when we do flute and piano stuff. And, you know, I know the tune and all the things you are, and I can get around all those changes, and they're still in my heart.
Your first composition, when did you write it? What was its title, and what was it for?
It was called Spring Song. It was for piano solo with an optional voice line. It was in A major. It was in 3/4, and I've lost it. Okay,
How old were you?
9. Okay, it's somewhere. Maybe it'll turn up one day. But then, you know, most of my composing in those years was writing arrangements for the bands that I was in, and I did hundreds of those. I still have them. They're on old moth-eaten paper up in my study. And then at Lehigh, I began trying my hand at composing, and I wrote a piece for flute and oboe. None of you know about this, but it's actually kind of nice. Theme and variations on the African hymn, Kumbaya. But then the next thing that fired me was my discovery that I'd always adored Stravinsky. I was always terrified of Schoenberg and thought, why don't I like this man better? He seems to be scary. And I found out that by playing his music, and particularly playing the Opus 19 piano pieces, which I learned, that I got my ears and my heart into what he was about as a composer. So my first composition that I'm really proud of and that stands on its own is called 4 Short Pieces for Piano, which is being played by Chris Lim later this afternoon. Katie Balch is working on it. I try my hand on it. It's from 1961. It's definitely uses an older composer as a model, but it doesn't imitate anything exactly. And I think it's a very good piece and still stands on its own quite well. So that's probably the first piece. And after that, in 1961, I wrote at least one work every year, all the way until now. I have about 52 pieces total.
you alluded to, sort of teased us with what it was like here at NEC in those first years. And this is an opportunity for us to hear a witness account from your perspective. I'm going to limit it for my own purposes, but you can expand it from the 10 years from 1968 to 78, which I think were really Gunther's years as president.
67 to 77 for Gunther.
Okay, so I mean, you were off, there you go. This precision persists with John no matter what. And no one feels badly about being corrected. So, so tell us, John, what was the place like?
Humming. There were great people all around too, and marvelous colleagues. Lyle Davidson sitting right over there. Very good friend early on, and a terrific teacher then, and a terrific teacher now. And by the way, a great sailor. You don't know that about Lyle, do you? We cruised together. He helped me win the first trophy I ever won in community boating. It was the Community Regatta in 1969. We had, let me get this right. We had 2 fifths, 2 fourths, and a second out of 30 races. 5 races with 30 boats. And we thought we maybe came in third. We came ashore at Lyle and we found out we'd won, right? And that was good enough to win in a 30-boat fleet. But coming to the conservatory, seriously, it was a great growth for me, learning. The institution was humming with new people. Gunther had brought in Rudolph Kolisch and Russell Sherman and Jan Strasvogel. Gunther created the first wind ensemble and soon had Frank Battisti to conduct that. The chorus under Lorna Cook de Varon was our flagship ensemble in those years, and everybody wanted to be in the chorus. Can you believe that now? We have a good chorus now too, look it up. But Lorna and the chorus always performed for the Boston Symphony. We were proud of them. Gunther conducted the orchestra. He created the chamber music program. He created the jazz department. He created the third stream department. He created the opera department. It was floundering, and then under Gunther it became firm again. He established the idea that a wind ensemble was important. He enriched the curriculum with tremendously increased number of courses. When I got here, there were no courses after the sophomore year. Can you believe that? Everybody just came and took their lessons and played the ensemble and went home after as juniors and seniors. And the morale of the students was not high. The playing wasn't all that good, although the brass and the winds were pretty good. I'll tell you what was really weak in those early years was the strings. You really couldn't get beyond the first stand and not find somebody who was really didn't belong. And so that has completely turned around. And Schuller had a lot to do with that, and a lot of important people came here, and the idea of contemporary music suddenly bloomed and flourished, and Gunther was a mentor to very, very many of us, and I count myself extremely lucky that we hit it off so well early and had so many collaborations and still do.
Can you think of any anecdotes in which you played a role, or even that you observed, that were emblematic of the time? For instance, it was humming because this happened. I remember this happening on a particular day.
Gunther was full of ideas. I'll go to him first, although there were many other people. Kolisch taught that everybody should play from score in chamber music. And he made everybody play Pierrot Lunaire from the score. And they're sitting there, these gigantic pieces of cardboard, reading their part off that. But it helps the ensemble. Schuller had many one-liners. He would give a downbeat in those years, and you would get this. And he would say, can you get that together? And he said, finally, if you keep doing that, I'm going to name it the New England Conservatory Arpeggiated Attack. So everybody got kind of teed off, and for about 6 months the attacks were quite together again before they stopped not being good anymore. Another comment he made was about how to make a crescendo. Students would see crescendo poco poco and immediately get way too loud. And he would say, you're doing this kind of a crescendo, where you go up so fast there's nowhere to go to. And then students said, well, how about if we do a linear crescendo gradually? And Gunther said, try that, and they did, and it didn't work very well either. Then he said, would you make a crescendo that starts slow and then gets increasingly intense and then really reaches a big peak way beyond what you expected? And the students did that. And then they said, well, what do you call that? And Gunther just shot out, I call that the erotic crescendo. And so then students went around practicing their erotic crescendos. And always were proud to say that they had mastered that. I joke. So those are some anecdotes. There are many others, but they don't come to mind as vividly as those do because they apply very directly to something you try to do well in performance, which is attack vertically and also to get a crescendo to have the right shape.
What did you do in Boston? You came and you talked about the family life and boating and that sort of thing. What did you do musically in your early time here in Boston, outside of the conservatory, to become part of the community life?
I freelanced. I played my flute a lot. I also still, in those years, played some saxophone. Jen Curtis is here, and we can remember that we premiered a piece by Newt Wayland, which he wrote for her, the great mezzo and high soprano too. Jen has all the range. I don't know what kind of soprano you are, but it's everything. And so I joined the Boston, in fact, I helped to form the Boston Musica Viva. Richard Pittman asked me if we could collaborate and create a new music group. So we did that. We played many concerts at the Bush Reisinger Museum. I substituted occasionally with the Boston Symphony, mainly in the later 70s when Papatsakis was ill. And I don't know to this day who kept hiring me, but it was probably Dorio, and who didn't want to be recognized as that. But I got to play with the BSO 12 times. Did the Mahler 9, the cantata by Roger Sessions, When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom, the Symphony of Songs, of course, by Stravinsky. And I freelanced a little bit with the Boston Ballet, and I was active as a player and as a composer in trying to get my music played. And I wrote several pieces for the Boston Musica Viva and then other groups that were coming up. Right away, the ensemble Collage, founded by my dear friend Frank Epstein, started to thrive. And while I was not a member as a player, I was very engaged with them as a composer. And so there was plenty happening outside the conservatory. I was also frightened that the school might close. And I don't think this is well known, but in 1971 we nearly did. And that year I took 2 other part-time jobs teaching at Northeastern and at MIT, just in case.
Was there any lesson, since you were here for that which is now a historical fact and phenomena, but we're so distanced from it, are there lessons about confronting that kind of calamity that would be helpful for us to think about in places that we are? I mean, we fortunately, through good stewardship, we're not as an institution.
I would say, at any school, try to hire a good business manager. It really helps. Somebody who keeps track of where the money is coming and where it's going. Try to get board members who want to invest of themselves personally as well as any funds that they might give. We had Mrs. Abigail Aldrich Rockefeller as a board member, and she died in 1971 and left us $1 million. And that's what kept the school going. It was just lucky. It's very important to project an image of health. And what happened was that Gunther was feeling so pessimistic about things that he saw into the Boston Globe an article about the conservatory being about to die. And this was supposed to raise money and everything, but it didn't work that way. And we survived, though, and Gunther stayed his full 10 years. And then we found that we had a new president to look for. Stan Ballinger came in, and the great find with Stan was his assistant, Larry Livingston, who's still dean at USC. Larry did a great job here for about 5 years. And then we were lucky that Larry Lester took the chair, and he stayed 13 years and helped the rebuilding of Jordan Hall. And then after that, Bob Freeman briefly, and then Daniel Steiner, who was fabulous, and now Tony Woodcock was fabulous. And you need a good president, you need a good team, and you need professionals outside of the music world to help with the financial and long-range planning.
You've been here as a flutist, composer, music historian, and master teacher. You were the second winner of the Krasner Award, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And I'm going to guess probably the first year the voting was close.
Well, Frank Battisti won it the first year, and he deserved to.
And so did you. What is your goal in teaching? Is it imparting knowledge, inciting curiosity, of all those things? And how do you sense when you have accomplished a teaching mission in a given moment? How do you know that you have done what you do?
I think the first thing is to value the composers. The older composers who we don't have, but we have their life work. It's a treasure given to us by people that were alive at the time they did it. Know what's in those notes and how they work and how they speak and what the emotion is. And then value living composers. because they are the people that are making the music that will be remembered later and is beginning to be known today. I can't remember what conductor said this. He said, we can't be nice to Schubert and Mozart as much as we appreciate them. One thing we can do is be nice to the composers who are living with us now. And so I like my students to believe that music is a very high, almost unmeasurably beautiful value in life. And that to be dedicated to that is to submit, really, if you will, to a higher power which you can serve. And so, you know, the specifics of that are play in tune, play on time, love your fellow players, understand the soul of the composer, know the score, know how to communicate with an audience. And then through my history and theory classes that I teach, try to know a larger repertoire than just that which you're playing or composing. And understand that it's a large continuum, one of the finest achievements of the human species on this planet, and that we're all adding to it. And as the filmmaker Ingmar Bergman says, it's a big building. Try to get your brick right. That's a profound comment. So we're all working on our own personal brick, and it's going to go in the building. The specifics of how I do that are too numerous to tell you. People who work with me know that I'm very big right now on linear intonation, tuning a tone with another person that played that tone earlier. I'm very big on balance. I'm very concerned that we play as well as we possibly can, and that this involves a deep understanding, not only mastery of the instrument, but mastery of the ear, mastery of the heart and the soul, and mastery of the process of how to learn. I'm still learning, by the way, and you said it earlier, the learning goes on, and I learned from my rehearsal that I had this morning. I learned from a fantastic coaching I had with the Futura string quartet yesterday. We took an hour and 10 minutes on one 11-minute movement of Webern, the string quartet piece is Opus 5, and we tuned everything. It was unbelievable what that did for the sound of the piece. So I want to tell you all, too, this is not a Lifetime Achievement Award. This is a half-lifetime achievement award. I'm still doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it.
The half-life of the Heiss element, therefore, is...
Yeah, I'm still radioactive.
I set him up. It's my job. Over the years, John, you have not only premiered a number of pieces, some of which are your own, many pieces by others, but there's repertoire that you have repeated. What is the role for you of pieces that you feel compelled that need to be returned to, and why do you return to them, and why do you feel that it's important for the students and or the institution to return to them? Pieces
that are so great and so unfathomably beautiful, and they have bottomless steps. You can never know the piece completely. Pierrot with Lunaire is such a piece. The St. Matthew Passion, the Magic Flute, the Eroica, a Dufay Mass, anything by Ligeti or Gubraidulina, Schuller and Harbison. Keep an eye out, okay? And let me know if this happens. Those are two names that are going to be remembered for centuries, and they're alive and working right now. You know, tune in to that. So some pieces come back to you because they won't let you go. And Pierrot is such a piece, and I've done Pierrot Lunaire about every 5 or 6 years since I've been here. I think it's 7 times now, and it keeps getting better. The piece improves. You know, the notes haven't changed, but something about our understanding of it and the ability of students to play it is improving. And the group that played it last April is spectacular people who wanted it so bad, and who rehearsed. We rehearsed about 85 hours from mid-January to mid-April, and that was just me with them. They also rehearsed about that much without me, and they gave a Pierrot last April, which is memorable. And they don't eradicate a memory of a previous one that I did about 6 years earlier, where the cellist was from the same family, but a different cellist. Courtney Van Diver played a Pierrot maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and Emily most recently this last year. And they were very different, but the two performances were both outstanding. So don't you go back. Everybody has favorite pieces, right? And the favorite piece is one that you've identified with, that speaks to you, and that seems alive and thriving and never static and never gone. And then you revisit it to play it again, and there it is again in all its newness. That's why we repeat things. And I think also there's an educational value. It's great for the students to encounter these masterpieces. These are milestones on the walk down the human history. And when you pass a milestone, you want to stop and give it a big hug. You learn from that.
You've brought a number of composers here over the course of your career, and you've acted as host and liaison between the composer and the students in the institution. And I thought I would like to mention, say a name of a composer that you've brought, and you give your responses to that.
Yeah, let me tell everybody, Charlie, the overall list. I got on a kind of a roll, beginning with Messiaen and Boulez, who both came in '86, and wanted to be here. Messiaen was here for the performance of St. Francis of Assisi, 3 scenes of his opera that the BSO was premiering at that time under Ozawa. And I knew him already from several encounters, and he, through his assistant, said, could I come and have a room to practice in at the conservatory? And he wanted a room also for his wife, the great pianist Yvonne Loriot. And so I said, look, we're going to get together a Messiaen concert. And without any real promotion, we announced this concert. It was April 14th, I think, 1986. And he was with us, and he coached pieces. And we had Jordan Hall filled with standing room only with no advertising. And Messiaen was miraculous. Great composers are unbelievable people. They hear things that the rest of us don't hear. And they understand things. And their being, the way they speak, the way they coach is priceless. Messiaen used to walk up and down our halls, by the way, and listen to what was coming out of the rooms. And the word got around that he was doing that, so every student started playing Messiaen, leaving the door open. and he walked in on a clarinet player named Dan McKelway. I don't know if you remember him from the mid-'80s. Danny is principal in Cleveland Orchestra, which he has been for many years. And Dan was working on, at the time, The Abyss of the Birds, the big clarinet solo in the Quartet for the End of Time, and Messiaen walked in the room, and the way Danny tells it is this. He came in the room, and I wondered who the hell that was. And he spoke to a translator, and he said, that was very interesting what you were doing. Could I hear it again? And Danny said, okay, I'll play it for you again, but by the way, who are you? And he said, I'm Messiaen. Dan had heart failure right there. So every composer that came enriched us in some way like that. And the ones that came mainly because they were hearing that it was working out well here. And people like Ligeti or Elliott Carter, Luciano Berio, Witold Lutosławski, they all came. I wrote them, invited them, and they came. And they almost always had the same terms. Don't tell my agent. And don't pay me anything. I want to be here to hear the music done right by young people. I want the music well prepared, and I want to hear many rehearsals. And if you will get this right on behalf of the music, I will come and I will try to be with your students. A lot of them felt that way. So we had, over 10 years' time, Messiaen, Ligeti, Carter, two or three times, Maxwell Davies, Sir Michael Tippett, Luciano Berio, who was a great friend for a while there, Pierre Boulez, briefly, Witold Lutosławski, and of course, Carter, Harbison, and Schuller, the 3 Americans on that list, all of whom have been here multiple times. That's been a great value to us, I think, and certainly to me, and certainly to them. They love young people playing their music. It thrills them, and then they can coach, and they can get the results, they said, probably better and more naturally than sometimes with the professional orchestra, where the time pressures make it impossible to have the same degree of communication you can have with students who want to get it right and want to take as much time as it takes.
We want to make sure we have a little time for questions, so I have 3 left.
I'll try to be briefer.
No, it's not brief at all. But you've been here for these many, many years at NEC.
45.
How has it changed? And not necessarily in the functional ways of the curriculum and that sort of thing, unless those are the things you find most important. But how has the institution changed in some way that is spiritual or deeply meaningful?
We love each other here. This is a community of people who care about the art and about each other, and we nourish each other here more than probably any other conservatory. We have a tremendously wide range of styles and activities, from ethnic to improv to jazz to contemporary music, early music, vocal, choral, operatic, everything about music is somehow in this school and thriving. So the breadth of the range is astonishing here. A third thing is that we're getting better. Let's keep trying to get better. And we are better now than we were 40 years ago by, it's almost unmeasurable. It's a completely different place. Same building. But there's a higher level of achievement, there's a higher morality, and a higher level of affection, and a sense of community and participation. And our strings have gotten to be very good.
You rolled, that answered the next question as well. So the final question for me would be this. We talked about your first day here, and sometime in the very, very, very distant future, you'll probably have a last day. What would you like that last day to be like?
I look at what happened. Jimmy taught until the last day of his life. He taught a flute lesson with his oxygen tent hooked up for his emphysema at some time that morning and died that afternoon. That's not a bad way to finish. And in a sense, you don't finish because your work is left behind you. And if you've written some pieces, that's left behind you for people to look at and listen to. The important thing is keeping going while you can. My dear wife was very brave with her illness and full of love and affection and humor and awareness and alert all the way to the last week. And she loved coming over here. I would say that you watch your grandparents or your parents and how people handle that last chapter. Certainly what Stravinsky did in his late years is a miracle. And I knew very well Verez late in his life, and Papatsakis, and Kolish, and Eugene Lehner, and Louis Krasner, all of whom I learned profound things from. And I learned profoundly from them how to keep going. And that's what you do. You don't stop. You just, eventually you don't breathe anymore, and then you can't do it. But you keep going with the thing that has fired your life, and it is the ultimate value that you're living for. So that's a quick answer.
Are there questions? We have 8 minutes by Ms. Weber's Swiss-run event, of which I'm only a cog in that wheel. So we have 8 minutes for questions, comments.
Nancy, what were you going to ask me? Nancy Fletcher, are you there still?
I'm here.
Yes, you had a question. That was a good one.
What was it? I'm getting
Well,
old.
you asked me who any influential teachers were, and I said, you. Okay, and that's still the case.
I did see a hand in the back. Is that a question? Please.
John?
Yes.
Leah from here. I want to thank you for teaching me that life can be more exciting than grout.
Then what?
Reading grout. That I can
Reading grout.
learn from the excitement of learning history can be a very wonderful.
This is Leslie Amper, who plays the Messiaen avant-garde, right?
Yes.
Better than probably anyone you'll ever have a chance to hear. Go to her concerts. Was there a question in that, though? You just said thank you.
I just wanted to thank you for showing us that life can be, the study of history and the knowledge of music can be very fun and lively and exciting.
It's useful to read, especially the later editions of Grout, which have improved. But I wouldn't limit your musicianship to the Grout book.
We don't use it anymore.
Okay, this is a musicologist speaking. I'll tell you what I use Grout for is to hold a piano lid open the right amount. But it was a useful book at one point in time. Other questions?
Yes, please. All right, I'll ask, are there any questions?
There should be there's some sailors in the room. Bill, do you want to ask me anything? Here's my friend Bill Kahn, who's a great sailor and a real pal for decades and decades. We've sailed together community boating. We played chess down in his cottage with his lovely wife Phyllis, who's right there next to him on the cape. And I often remark that sailing and music have a lot to do with each other. And Bill, by the way, you wouldn't know this, he probably knows Gershwin better than anyone living. Okay, he knows everything by Gershwin, and he can play a lot of it. And when he can't play it, then he asks me to play it. And if I don't get it right, he tells me. But Bill, any questions about any of this?
No, I can't think of any right off the bat here, except when you're going to play another Gershwin piece for me.
Oh, okay. Is it Jeff or Brian? You just raised your hand?
Yeah.
My nephew, Brian.
So, Uncle John, if you had the opportunity to take Rum Punch out with any composer, living or deceased, who would it be and why?
That's a good question. Rum Punch is a Catalina, not a Catalina, excuse me, a CNC 38 that Arlene and I sailed on for 20 years. We covered the entire coast with that boat from probably Shelter Island all the way to the Maine Canadian border and everything in between. I miss Rum Punch. It got sold. I don't have Rum Punch. I have now either Elusive or Excellence from the Johansson Charters up in Rockland, Maine, or I get the wonderful Catalina here in Scituate called Sunshine. So who would I take out on those boats? I would try to take out everybody. Not all at the same time, no. Catherine, my sister.
John, would you tell the anecdote one more time about when you were driving down Midland Avenue, I think it was in Bronxville, in my soon-to-be husband's Porsche, I believe, and you had to pull over because you were trying to figure out the answer to...
Yeah, that's two stories actually that go together. All right. For odd reasons, I kept, when I was in my early 20s and in my teens, I got into trouble with the police over and over again. And usually for the weirdest of things, like when I played the fire signal on the trombone out the school window. I was with my friend, we heard the door open, we looked, there was the school principal, the music teacher, the chief of police, and the chief of the fire department. I was standing there. I don't have to tell you what happened, okay? Got detention for a long time for that. But then the policeman that I got to know stopped me once when I was driving my brother-in-law Doc's Porsche. And he gave me a little ticket for driving without the proper license. And I had a license, but it didn't show that this was my car. It was somebody else's car. So that was all right. I went with that. And it was also the policeman that put me in the jail cell after we were arrested for playing the town fire signal. But then the third time was the killer. I've been at a class at Columbia. I'm being told that if you tune perfect fifths, 12 of them, you come to a tone which is an octave away from where you started, or do you? And the answer is you don't. If you tune 12 perfect fifths, and then you get the same note by tuning 7 perfect octaves, they're not the same and they're not even close. And I was very annoyed at that. I thought, look, there is a God, why would he do that? Or she? This is not fair. We want perfect octaves and we want perfect fifths and we can't have them. And the teacher explained, this is why we found equal temperament. You flatten all the fifths by the 1/12 of that amount and it comes out okay and it doesn't sound too bad. And the difference between the tone you get with the fifths and the tone you get with the octave is called the Pythagorean Comic. So the Greeks knew that already. So I was trying to do the math. He said, do the math. So you take the interval of an octave, 2/1, and raise it to the 7th power. Okay, that's 128. That's not hard to figure out. Then you take the interval 3/2, which is the interval of a fifth, and raise that to the 12th power. I was trying to do that in my head, and I couldn't do it. So I pulled off the highway in my hometown on the Bronx River Parkway, and got over and got a light on and started writing out the math to do it, multiplying it out, and this bright light shone in my window. A policeman said, "What do you think you're doing?" And I looked right into the light. I was a little irritated, and I said, "Well, I'm trying to figure out why equal temperament was necessary." Then he arrested me. So that's the story Catherine's asking for. I think that's it, isn't it?
Well, that's because he was a mean-toned policeman.
Yes. Beautiful.
Wonderful. This is perfect. We have one minute, and I think there's a flute player over there who has a question.
Or Veronica Yoakum.
No, actually, your daughter has a question. Laura,
Let's take two. We'll go with Laura. Are you here somewhere with a question?
she's right over there.
I don't see
All the
Laura.
things that you love and have been talked about today, one has not yet been mentioned, and I wondered what the connection between the Red Sox and the art music is.
Yeah, sure. My dad took me to a Yankee Red Sox game when I was 9. I walked in, big place with a lot of people making a lot of noise and booing like hell because a tall left-handed batter was coming up to the plate with 2 outs in the first inning. and they were yelling obscenities at him. And I was hurt for him. I liked the way he looked, and I liked the way he hit a triple on the next pitch, by the way, to left center field and slid into third base with a cloud of dust. And I said to my father, "Who's that?" And he said, "That's Ted Williams." Okay, hooked for life. My hero, Stravinsky in music, Ted Williams in baseball. Okay, and so I became a Red Sox fan when I was very young, and it kept me out of trouble because all the Yankee and Dodger and Giant fans in my crowd of youngsters were always having fist fights over which was the better team. And they would come up to me and say, "Who are you for, the Yankees or the Dodgers?" And I said, "I'm for the Red Sox." And that got me out of trouble. Is that okay?
Ran, you wanted to say something Ivesian.
Would you give us one of your great Charles Ives stories, John?
God, there's so many. Ben Zander likes to tell this one. I went in to coach with the Youth Philharmonic Orchestra at 3 places in New England by Ives, which is being done by our symphony here later this year. And during the process, one of the students called on me, raised his hand and said, "Mr. Ives, would you please explain this to us?" So let's end on that. We have a long day ahead of us.
Thank you, John, for everything.